Yeah, no, that's brilliant. And then moving on, you launched Hindustan Times in Bombay, the probably the biggest newspaper right now in India, one of them at least.
Yes.
And like launching it in Bombay, the big one of the biggest hubs in India. What was that like?
So actually, this was quite accidental because I remember, someone I know who had become the CEO of Hindustan Times, and the gentleman called me saying, "Look, Ranga, we are looking for a CEO in Mumbai, and can you recommend someone?" And I was actually working with a company in Goa at that point of time, and I did give him a few names, but end of the day, finally, I ended up joining them, and I obviously didn't come from the newspaper background. But even him, his name was Mr. Rajiv. So he and a lot of other people were not from the newspaper background because he was creating a new team. And Bombay was a very, very, very critical launch because Hindustan Times in those days was a very Delhi-centric paper. They had never really ventured out into a big market like Mumbai. And Mumbai was the cash cow for Times of India,
Mm.
right? So they minted money over here. And for Times of India, Mumbai was almost like a money-making machine. And they generated so much profits that unless you dented them there, you could never compete with them. So it was a very critical one. So it was a very challenging one. But again, we did a lot of interesting things. And we did something which possibly never happened before in the history of a newspaper launch. Uh, Day one of launch, and Times of India had a front page ad welcoming Hindustan Times, Bombay. Okay, it was very fascinating, and this was again thanks to the CEO and how we thought as a team. The reason is there was another paper called the DNA which was launching. So suddenly, Times of India realized, oh God, I've got two competitors coming, and they wanted to increase production, but they didn't have a plant in place. And Hindustan Times had a great plant, and we said, okay, we'll print Times of India for you in our plant if you want, because we have spare capacity, because that's
Yeah.
money making for us, right? But we said, quid pro quo, while we do that, we want an ad in your paper. They said, what? We need to welcome you to our own city. And we said, yes. And we also wrapped up a huge building in South Bombay.
Uh-huh.
The whole building was wrapped up as a newspaper saying, here. So we did a lot of cool things and great team, a lot of hard work. Launching a newspaper is not easy, very, very complicated to do. And that was a very interesting new experience, for the Hindustan Times.
Wrapping up a building is crazy. Yep, but believe it or not, that's not where it ends. You also set up one of the first Indian startups in China, getting funding from SoftBank. So, what was the startup?
So this was a company in India called Contest to Win. And I was working at that time with Pepsi. So I was the marketing person. And there was a gentleman called Alok Kejriwal who used to run Contest to Win. And he ended up meeting me in Pepsi. And they were a contesting website. And he wanted to do a lot of work with Pepsi. So we got into a deal in those days where we said, okay, Pepsi is a cool brand. Let's work with you. The other cool brand in those days used to be MTV,
Mm.
right? So they were one of the coolest pairs you could have as clients. And Alok had both MTV and Pepsi as clients. And we never paid him because we did a barter deal with him. And we did a lot of cool things. And that was using technology in those days. Okay, we never had smartphones and all that stuff. So that was a very cool thing to do. And I think Alok one day was talking to one of his investors. And he said, we've got this client called Ranga. He does a lot of great things with us, but he doesn't pay us. And the investor says, why doesn't he pay? He says, well, he doesn't. So the investor called me and said, look, why don't you pay Alok? And I said that because he never asks for money. He agrees to barter deals, so we do barter deals. So long story short, they said, look, why don't you come and join us? I said, okay. And when I joined them, there was no revenue. And the first year itself, we grew so much of revenue overnight, and we did extremely well, and we had great numbers. And then we decided to do a joint venture, in China, and set up Contest to Win there. And when we went there, I realized the mobile market was huge. So we changed the business model from contesting using, laptops and computers to using phones. So we became a wireless mobile business called Mobile to Win. And end of the day, that company was finally sold to Disney,
Oh,
by Alok.
oh, interesting.
So
And
that was again a very interesting story.
getting funding from I can't imagine that that would be easy getting funding from SoftBank. Like, what was the process? What were the challenges, and what do you recommend young entrepreneurs to do while trying to get funding? All three of those.
So I guess, one of the key things in life, uh, and you need to practice it at the personal level and also at the corporate level, is the art of one, being honest, and the second is the art of storytelling. You need to be able to take complex things and not make it simple, but make it simple and interesting and fascinating. So people listen to you. They don't just hear what you're saying, but they listen to you because it's fascinating. So you actually can't go into a pitch saying, I've got the best idea in the world and I will prove it to you. You need to tell a story where the person connects with it, saying, okay, this is interesting, this is fascinating, this sounds like something I want to be a part of. Or it sounds fascinating, but I definitely don't want to be a part of it because I'm clear about it, which is also fine. So you can't expect, to meet two people and say both rejected me, so I've got a terrible idea. Possibly they don't want to invest in a company, which possibly is good, but maybe it doesn't, sync with, their vision of what they want to invest in. But the thing is, if they like it, but they can't invest in it, they say, look, we think it's a great idea, but we honestly can't invest because of this reason. But maybe we'll put you on to people we know who like stuff like that. So a lot of times, most people I know, they communicate from their perspective. They don't understand the other person's perspective in terms of saying, look, they don't understand as much about my business as I do. So let me make it simple and explain. Right? And that's what. And it's also about how you communicate with people, how you discuss things with people, how so-called arguments happen. A lot of time arguments are because you're only looking at your point of view. You're not realizing that the other person doesn't understand you because of this reason. So you change your pitch so that they understand what you're trying to say. And then you know that they've understood it, but they still disagree, which is fine, but they've understood it. Right? So you need to learn the art of storytelling, for anything like a pitch. Very, very important.
Yeah, and what you said about understanding the other person's perspective, that reminds me of the book Seven Habits of Highly Effective People. Look for like a win-win rather than a win-lose or a lose-win. And that's when either you'll resolve the argument or at least understand each other better than you would have otherwise, right? And
So it's like, for example, let's say you're buying a house and the final negotiated price is, let's say, 2 crores. Give the person 2 crore, 1 lakh. You will never have a problem when you sign the deal.